the webinar, there are many slides which I would like to bring your attention to. I will not go through every detail of every slide because you will be receiving the contents directly following our presentation today. The major things that we want to look at is how can we in an organization achieve our strategic business objectives, be them corporate or operational. Question being, are we doing the right projects for the right reasons? And we'll be going through that together. And we have to set clear priorities. There are many challenges we have in funding, in timing, in resources, and it will be a shame to waste our efforts and money. And therefore, we need to have some form of selection criteria to launch from the initiatives to our programs and projects that bring the best business value to the organization. So that's going to be our major objective. I have the great pleasure of also through Informa giving seminars in project portfolio management and the PMO, and you may well be interested to book on your little agendas for the 20th to the 23rd of September of this year. There will be a 4-day full presentation on this topic. So we'll welcome you in person, hopefully following this webinar. Let's put things into context. If you look at any organization, be it private or public, there are certain goals that needs to be achieved on the transformational, strategic, basically how are we going to get the organization to move forward, and on the operational level, how do we every day meet our goals on producing, manufacturing, or servicing our clients and our markets. There are 3 areas that all organizations need to be looking at constantly: how to grow and how to seek opportunities, how to maintain a competitive advantage given the variety of factors that guide an enterprise in its market, and the sustainability and the continuability of its current operations. Those are 3 major focus points which are distributed across the organization from corporate down to functional groups. And some words I'd like to introduce here. The word strategic is often used when we're discussing things which are going to be overarching and taking the corporation or the division over a period which is going to be longer than a financial or fiscal year. They are also transformational in the sense that we are doing things differently. Sometimes they are dramatically different. And on the other side of the equation, we have what is called tactical, operational. These will be mostly at the functional groups, departmental levels, where there are things to be achieved in order to sustain and to maintain the current operations. So we're looking at these goals that are being built in different organizations at different times of the year, and they are reviewed on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis, depends on the organization. In fact, as soon as we talk about anything that has to do with reviewing how we're going to meet our goals, we are automatically going to associate it to the major change agent being a project. And change management is in fact very directly associated to meeting our goals through projects. And as you can read here, there are a lot of techniques that are being used. I won't go through them in this particular seminar, but projects of continuous improvement or business process engineering and so on are all part and parcel of the organizational challenges to be able to meet the goals that they have set. The end result is value creation. I think that we all have that in mind. Obviously, for private organizations, it is going to be very capitalistic. However, for public organizations, you're dealing with a public that you have to service and its level of content. Many things happen in every organization. So again, this large blue dot in the middle just repeats what I've just said before. And how can you be proactive, and how do you want to be avoiding being reactive? Well, there are 6 major areas that organizations constantly need to have their finger on the pulse. What are our markets? How do we actually get our solutions and our products to the market? How do we, in fact, have an organization which is effective, which is slick? How are we ensuring that we have got a staff and a workforce that is highly skilled and empowered and motivated? What is the technology use in the organization? How is that going to be beneficial? and how do we actually spend and how do we make our investments. These things may or may not be under our control directly because they are within the limits of our boundaries. However, they will be constantly bombarded with external influences. And you can read a few of them here. So this makes it that whatever goals that anyone would like to set, we have to deal with current situations, which are dynamic because they will evolve, and external situations, which will bring their own disturbance to whatever we try to achieve. Best to be proactive than be reactive. So the whole of the goal setting is a challenge and has to start with some form of approach to things. And change has to be incorporated. We have to have a mentality of change where we want change to happen, and it also happens paradoxically in an environment of change. So how do we ensure that what we launch, we're doing it right? So two major questions that I believe all organizations have to ask themselves. Are we doing the right thing? And the thing, are we doing it right? There are many things that we need to do right in the organization. Depends whether it's private or public. And you have here a short selection of the different questions one should ask. And an organization functions through its different processes and methodologies. That's the light blue scheme that you've got on the right-hand side. And the different points of these processes need to be measured because operationally, in order to obtain and sustain and maintain our organization, we have to address all operational issues, which will arise as normal operations go. But some of them are rather extreme, could be waste, it could be costly steps, low quality. And these things are being addressed at the operational level, whilst we have to also look at the opportunities that exists. This could be maybe at the higher levels, business levels, or corporate levels, of how is the organization going to grow towards maybe markets, products, services, and whatever alliances they might want to establish. So there are multiple things going on at the same time, and many established goals need to be met whilst new goals have to be established. And through that, there will be preoccupations of reviewing, are we being effective? So are we doing the right thing? But also, are we doing the thing right? And that will lead to strategy formulation. Now, the word strategy, I remind you, has got a military origin. We'll not be using it in military terms here. And it's a question of reviewing at a large macro level where we want to go. And it starts with having established the mission, which has to be aligned to the vision of the organization, the goals we'd like to meet, and the smart objectives we would like to achieve. And these will be the measurable objectives. And each organization will have its own time frames, short-term, medium-term, long-term, and depending on that organization, the different levels of management will establish in a cascade from corporate goals down to their operational goals, what needs to be achieved in those time periods. So the strategic business objectives that we are looking at here are those which will maintain the organization healthy and obviously will maintain that health into the future. Many techniques can be used. I've just have here a particular example of a SWOT technique, which is, as you well know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, in order to be able to measure impacts which need to be considered from going from one situation to another. So what we are building here from the levels of strategic thinking is how are we going to now do the right thing? And the right thing is what initiatives do we need to launch? And those initiatives will be converted into programs and projects depending on the size of the initiative. Now we are entering a place where the strategy is going to be converted to projects. And I don't have to tell most of you who are listening that the projects are the key instruments of change. And if you have multiple projects that all are going to compete with limited resources, limited funding over limited time frames in order to create value, then in order to achieve any business benefits, one needs to choose which ones of these projects we need to perform, how we need to perform them, and how to allocate priorities to them. I would categorically say that the project portfolio management is the key approach to accomplish and achieve any business goals, strategic at the higher level and strategic operational at the lower level. So our discussion today is, do we need to have project portfolio management, and what does it bring to the table? Well, it brings order. It brings higher levels of success, or if you want to say it in another way, lowering the levels of failure. But that's a bit cynical rather. Projects are in a framework of classical top-down management by objectives. This particular slide takes you through visions, high level, of course, mission for the organization could also be broken down at the divisional level. Objectives, which are going to give us quantitative descriptions through the SMART model of desired accomplishments, broken down into strategy, which are going to be established for the major macro roadmaps, and broken down even further into tactics. So you have, in fact, mission, objective, strategy, and tactics, which some of you may know is the MOST model. And at the lower level, we will have projects with their normal documentation and the normal life cycles for development and execution. So what we have, eventually, if you just look at pure management of projects, a picture of this nature. Each project needs to be understood, and there has to be a mechanism for mapping a project to a given strategy. And we have to be very rigorous, and we have to measure on multiple criteria. Obviously, there'll be some financial criteria, there are going to be some risk criteria, there are going to be some market fit criteria, and the most important thing is it bringing benefit to the organization, and that is something which needs to be assessed. So each project contends for space. Each project will have a very well-established business case. However, what we need, if you look at the model of vision, mission, and tactics, as we've seen before, in between there, we have to have a mechanism for selecting, are we doing the right projects? Okay, and that's the portfolio management system. If I drop the word project out of portfolio management, it's because it concerns projects and programs. And the portfolio management system will filter through from the given initiatives of strategy, which particular projects would be in our tactical area. So you have here a cascading effect where each time you go down one level, you are exploring more what needs to be achieved. But from the portfolio to the tactics, we are weeding out, if I can use this strong word, those that are not contributing to the benefits of the organization for whatever reason, so that those that are left, the tactical ones, are placed in operation. This could be at the corporate level, divisional level, departmental level, or your own functional groups. You will have the same approach, filtering, so that those that go through the filter can then be assessed whether or not they can contend for a place in a portfolio. And then one launches the projects which have been selected. Okay, this will help us to reduce the amount of waste. I do not know if you know the statistics, but in general, most projects are about 185% over budget and about 180% overrun, and I'm not talking about what kind of quality they have. These are statistics that are very well known. Now, why is that? Well, maybe we're launching too many projects at the same time. They could be useful, but they're each competing against each other. And I think that most of you have certainly experienced when project resources are not available or funding is suspended because priorities change elsewhere. It will happen, but most probably it will happen less because it will be managed better. What is our project portfolio management trying to achieve? Well, it has to align the whole of the work to the organizational vision. It's got to support strategy. And we have to be rigorous. It also demonstrates whether or not an organization is serious in its management of projects and management by projects. And there are many stakeholders, and they're all vying for position, and they're all vying for their own results. And a formal, objective, rigorous, and rational project portfolio management system allows people to at least understand it's all done for the benefits of the organization. So what does PMI give us as to definitions of a project portfolio? You can read that through. Some of you may already have portfolios, for example, a shares portfolio. I don't have one, but I wish I had one. So basically a portfolio is this repository of information, in this case will be projects, which will be managed together. So they are each going to be concomitantly performed with the others in the same portfolio. And management of that portfolio, as you can see some key words, is to identify these projects or programs, set priorities, and controlling their evolution, and always with an eye to the business benefits and the strategic intents that have been stated in order for those projects to be launched in the first place. So we have something which is a rigorous approach, and at any one time, a project portfolio, if one looks at it at any point of time t, will reflect the strategic intent. These are the projects that the organization is performing, therefore this is what the organization is going for, and thus that is a strategic intent that corporate wants, or whatever higher management wants in your department or your division. It's very, very key, very key. The portfolio will set priorities, and that has to be done with a criteria which makes sense, which is rational and is shared. And the portfolio management will also choose, or shall we say, suggest to management what choices have to be made for investment, be it CapEx or OpEx. And there's not an abundance of resources in any organization, so there is going to be the possibility, once one aggregates the resources required in a portfolio, to distribute them in the most effective way according to the priority set. And once that is being done, the projects can be quantified, and that is also another criteria for placing them in some form of rank. What's the value to the business, okay? And how do these business drivers affect where we're going with this project? Because the business driver tells us exactly what we're trying to achieve, but that might change over time, which means that throughout the whole life of a project in a portfolio, the projects have to be assessed, and whether they are constantly being aligned to whatever strategy has been established, and it is reviewed. We'll see later on what kind of frequency that can be done. However, we do not want to find ourselves that projects and or programs are no longer either useful within the strategy of the organization, or they have veered away so much that they will no longer bring any business value. So the portfolio again has a major contribution to the organization. It has a focus, right? And the focus is on business benefits, and that focus is going to be given as a major priority to whoever manages the entity of project portfolio management. And we have to be very strict on the returns and how we're going to manage that value. And most of all, I think if change is here to stay, you've got to follow it. And if you say no to change, change will say no to you. And any initiative that is launched, any project that is launched in an environment that is dynamic. Therefore, the portfolio, very much like all the players in projects, have to be responsive to change. And in that way, we can maintain the alignment. Just think of a sailboat, and no sailboat goes in a straight line for longer than a short period. However, they reach the goals after zigzagging through waves and currents and trying to avoid, I don't know, other boats and tankers and goodness knows what. And that is how I see the portfolio management to be. Each particular project is like a yacht or a sailboat in a large flotilla, and they're all trying to get to the other end safely, hopefully. And the actual expectations of many managers and many also stakeholders through communication, through frequent communication, so that some of the key stakeholders can make decisions. Sometimes socioeconomic factors do change. I don't have to remind you what happened in 2008, nor do I have to remind you what happened the end of last year in the oil and gas industry. So these things are disturbing the journey of any initiative, and key stakeholders need to make some decisions on that. So how do we establish these things? Well, let's have a look at the whole group of projects that we can have. That's on the right-hand side of your slide here. All right, you have different types of projects that are broken down across the organization. Obviously, those which are going to be our investments for assets and etc. These are the capex. Usually will come from corporate or the higher levels of a division. The OPEX, operational ones, these are continuous improvement, fix and fail projects, those kind of things. And on the right-hand side, for those organizations that sell their services in projects to external clients, these will be the projects they launch once they get an award. And there are many challenges in order to be able to select each of the projects we would like to have in a portfolio in a rigorous manner. So how do we assess projects? So that is something that has to be put into place. Each project needs to have substantiating evidence, so we say business cases and feasibility studies and so on, so that the selection process based upon criteria can be valid enough for individuals to follow. And we have to make decisions when we have to stop projects and kill projects. It's a shame, it's a pity. However, if a particular project is no longer bringing value, and we may have obviously spent some money on it, it's a tough decision, but better cut your losses early on. Now we're going to have what is called skunk works. Now that's a lousy term. You may know what a skunk is. It's this animal that doesn't smell so good. It's black and white. The reason for that is there are many projects that try to bypass the process and are being performed undercover, shall we say. So that's okay. However, they are sucking away at corporate resources, corporate funding, and obviously the attention of people away from what should be the visible projects. We need to have a selection process which will look like a funnel. So on the left-hand side of this slide, what you have here are all the contenders to be accepted in our portfolio. And they are driven by corporate needs, transformational needs, operational needs. There are a lot of corporate KPIs that need to be achieved, a lot of market data, and I just sort of summarize this into the general entry points. Now, the funnel, as obviously as a funnel, will be tapered to the right-hand side. So all these little circles are projects that are knocking at the door. They need to be assessed. That's like a filtering system. Do they meet a variety of criteria, which we do not have time, unfortunately, in this webinar to go through. And those particular diamond shapes are gates. So we filter out, and then we're left with a few more that pass the initial filtering criteria. We evaluate their contents, which is business value, risks, through a variety of other parameters, which are now going to give us a rank. And if they pass that particular step of evaluation, we go through another gate where we say, okay, let's move now, and we launch, so we say, the project proper with project charters and so on. And planning then proceeds, but planning will also give us much more data, and during that whole period of planning, it may be some external factors come to give us some changes. So there's another gate before we even start to develop and execute the project before we deliver it. And eventually, those little 3 dots at the end are the ones which are the most effective for the organization. And maybe there are 50 or 60 knocking at the door to actually enter, which tells us that it's a rigorous process. It's better to do less projects that are successful for a higher degree of probability than a lot of projects where most of them fail. Figure that one out. I think I figured it out a long time ago. Now, we need to balance how many projects we want to do, especially at the operational level. The operational levels work on budgets. They have their own limited funding for maintaining and sustaining operations. They have certain ongoing projects within their operations, but there are also some corporate transformational projects that are going to request their resources and their time. So how to balance which of those two projects or needs are going to be of a higher priority. We need to have consistency, and we have to know the corporate KPIs. I mean, the alignment can only be made according to some criteria which has originally been established. And do we have the organizational capacity and ability and resources? How do we do that? I mean, how do we map, at least for internal resources, be them human resources and other resources, materials, equipment, and so on, that we have the ability to perform the variety of projects that we may have evaluated, but we cannot. Many projects get shelved. And how do we get the funding? And the funding theoretically should be assigned according to priority set, because the priorities are a reflection of what projects or programs have the highest or best, in inverted commas, best business value. These are major decisions, okay, and they need to be applied in rigor. And management has to support the process. Why? Because there's gonna be a lot of politics, and certain high-ranking members of the political group of an organization will be using their rank to force through certain types of projects for whatever reasons that may not fit a selection criteria which is objective. So be good for everybody to play the same game of the same sheets. So what we have on the right-hand side, again, here we have the funnel. There are certain pieces of information that must be present in the pre-analysis between the strategy formulation and the initiative formulation. There has to be some business analysis that be made, and there has to be some processes where we understand what are the metrics we're going to use in order to go from a situation of today to a situation for tomorrow. There has to be a full analysis of the business benefits. That's usually done in the business case, and that is done by individuals who have demonstrated their ability to know how whatever product or service that will be eventually in a new situation, new state, will be measured. And following that, we have a priority system. So the whole criteria allows us not only to filter, but also to assess. And that assessment will give us a go, no go. And when it is go, then we need to ensure how we're going to be reporting on that particular progress of the project. And we have to know how we're going to be in the overall capacity planning, how we're going to be distributing resources, both internally and externally. So we have a cycle. So that's a particular circle on the right-hand side of your screen. We have a selection step. We have a updating of the portfolio. Basically, the project or the program is inserted into the portfolio system. We manage the portfolio by collecting progress data, evaluating reports, and understanding what the statuses are. And we refresh, basically we update, meaning as well, we may well change priorities of certain projects in the portfolio. We might also stop new ones. We might be able to also suspend certain as new projects come along that seem to be shifting the priority. So it's a very dynamic thing. So we need to have a formal cycle to initiate the whole process. So what are the goals for each project? And they can change according to the business value. Excuse me. Criteria for project portfolio is very important. That will be what project managers and key stakeholders will need to constantly abide to, or else there's no point having a criteria if everybody changes it depending on their mood. And what is the frequency of reporting? How fast do we want to react? The response time between the performance of a project in the portfolio and its evolution in an environment of the organization, be it for meeting its goals or also for responding to external factors. And roles and responsibilities have to be established. Who does what? Does a project manager make decisions? Does the portfolio manager make the decision? These are very, very good questions. We can answer these maybe later on at the end of the webinar, or I invite you at a 4-day course where you're going to be able to ask more questions and you get more answers. So what are we trying to achieve here? Constantly strategic intent. Strategic intent will give you the prioritization. That is mapped against how many projects and programs do we have, so that resources are allocated. And those resources are allocated according to the priority that has been set. Then, when we break down from the intent to programs and projects, then we see which deliverables are there and how they are going to be assigned the necessary resources in order for us to be able to achieve the results, not only of producing the deliverables for the project, but to produce the business value in operations post-delivery of the product or service. Okay, and that's a contribution. That's the contribution of the project to the project portfolio strategic intent, and it will change. It's nothing is static, ladies and gentlemen. We establish at day one a certain set of criteria based upon assumptions that we're making, and as we move forward, those assumptions can well evolve, plus also other factors can come in and guide us through different steps. So projects are assessed by team. So we're going to be setting up a project portfolio selection team, and they are looking at the contribution to business value. That team would be a committee, could be a portfolio management team, it could also have project sponsors or project managers part of that team. And the screening will allow us to be able to evaluate whether the business value can be achieved. If there's any information that's lacking, it's like a checklist. You know, for example, a business case has not been developed with sufficient detail, or some of the risks have not been identified at all, then the committee will request more information. So there's a loop back here, always to enhance the quality of what we're doing. And we all make assumptions. Every decision that has to be made, every plan that has to be made is full of assumptions. Assumptions are because we have not got all the information on hand. So how good are those assumptions? And we can validate them, or we can infirm them, and therefore back to the drawing board. We need to then select the projects, and by doing so, there's a higher level of commitment, because then we can see it is for the benefit of the organization. One of the things that is needed is for the project management community to have more of an entrepreneurial approach, meaning understanding that projects do not finish for the organization just at the final sign-off and approval. They carry on because the fruits of the efforts of a project can only be measured in operations. So the more a project manager has a good sense of the total life cycle of a project and service, the better he or she can contribute to bring information to the portfolio team so that assessment can be made accordingly. There's going to be, of course, some governance to be established, final approval with project charters authorizing the project to proceed, ranking, key resources are being assigned, which obviously means that they are going to be allocated to a particular project, and try to avoid same assignments same resource assignments to multiple projects. It's a real formula for disaster. You document these because as we will go through the evolution of a project, we want to map constantly against the business goals and the assumptions to see what evolutions we have, and get the funding. Now, the funding will be maybe like a authorization for expenditure to initiate the funding, and at prescribed gates throughout the project development and the portfolio gates, that funding is reviewed in order to see whether it is necessary to continue, to increase it, to decrease it, and unfortunately at times to cut it. So from the project management point of view, there are many things that the project portfolio team needs to perform, and one of the things is to take from each project manager, and for the project that has been selected, therefore is going to planning, the individual project plans. So once we get in after the charter, we have the different project plans. These have to be consolidated, aggregated, so The project portfolio team builds what could be called a master plan, which considers all the projects in the portfolio at this particular stage, those which are ongoing, those which have just been added, so that one can get a complete picture of the time frame, the resource needs, the cost needs, the funding needs, and rearrange the priorities according to what has already been stated as to the priorities set for any given project. And given that the portfolio can have a much better global picture of how all these projects are contending for the same resources and funding, and the priorities will set who gets what, and how does that fit to the interaction that projects have because of their internal maybe interfaces. And schedules are modified. Schedules are modified. Obviously, management will get the modified schedules, and some of them may not be happy because some of the goals they're trying to achieve within a certain time frame will be pushed because of low priorities. I once had a project that went down to priority 147. My joke to management was, do I get human resources in what, in photographs or in real? But they didn't appreciate that joke, by the way. And once that is done, then the whole of the portfolio is reviewed and the people can continue. And the most important thing is, how do we manage our capacity to resource any project? So many softwares on the market, by the way, that allow us to aggregate project plans and determine what are the resource requirements. There are not so many softwares, or at least management aids, that tell us, well, what is our current capacity against which we can map our capacity requirements. So I'll let you delve into that, because we need to know over a rolling period of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, what are the resources not only that are required for the portfolio, but what resources are available of all types, by type, by profile, by many types of criteria. So as we get through the project portfolio, the major goal of the project portfolio was to therefore push through these projects through the planning and implementation. And once they've gone through assessment and evaluation, they are in the portfolio and consuming funding and resources. One has to establish with the project managers the frequency of feeding into the portfolio so that the projects are assessed always with a view for the benefits, okay, and the compliance to objectives. So what, on one side, the portfolio manager looks at the business and the market factors, because these will be affecting maybe a well-managed project that is performing correctly and meeting its original goals and meeting its milestones. However, some of the business factors have evolved. And that's one thing. Then changes in priorities depending on other decisions made by management. And that will also shift how the portfolio management team will view the progress of a project. Risks will evolve, be them obviously within the project itself and for the environment where the projects are being managed. So it's continuous, and progressively you will find that certain projects will be performed at a higher level of quality. There are going to be a lot of reports that are made. Here again, I invite you to look and know on your favorite Google or whatever. There are a great number of project portfolio management tools. They're excellent. Remember, they can only give you the data that you've actually data entered. Okay, so they look great on the different representations, but what data do you have actually to introduce? However, very powerful and will allow you to evaluate and make decisions and shift priorities where necessary. What are the strategic alignments? What are the values? What's the health of the project? What are the risks? And how are we meeting with our different constraints and dependencies? Project portfolio management has certain responsibilities, and these are varied, and it will be held by a project portfolio manager, and having the possibility of bringing together a variety of projects in the portfolio and making sure they are beneficial to the organization, A lot of reporting and monitoring, a lot of analysis has to be performed so that we are going on track, and providing recommendations to decision makers. Okay? These are very important factors so that it does not counter a project manager's relationship with his or her direct project sponsor. Okay, we are looking at how the projects together contribute to the organization. Many questions are often asked, well, how many project portfolios do we have? Well, this particular screen gives you an idea of what an organization could be. There could be many business units, could be many support units. Type of support units could well be HR, IT, and so on. And they have programs and projects. So they're all there belonging to their particular organizational units. So one could have a corporate portfolio which comes from the executive VPs, that would be corporate wide, and therefore needs to be put right across the organization, all business units and all support units. But within each organizational unit, you could well have that unit's portfolio that concentrates specifically on its programs and projects. So you could have more than one project portfolio which is assigned to a particular organizational entity. Obviously, the dotted line shows that there must be some coordination so that common processes can be applied, common criteria can be applied as much as possible. There is a question which we may have asked you for PMO, not yet. We'll ask you at the end. It's okay, let's move on. About the PMO, and there's always some confusion as to what is the project portfolio management and the role of the PMO. I invite you to other seminars that we have here at Inform in Dubai, where I have the pleasure of presenting. Basically, if you have a business strategy, you have a demand management system, and that will be converted into project and program management. So there are two major forms of approach. The project portfolio management sits between the demand management and what program and project management, and that answers the question, are we doing the right thing? In order to do the thing right, Project Management Office is a supporting organization of the discipline of how to perform projects, methodologies, processes, tools, techniques, education, and all types of other support. That's one particular view. Now, as one moves into a much more mature level of demand management, one can create what is called a center of excellence, which combines the two, and that gives you a very, very strong mechanism of management of portfolios and supporting the discipline. Coming to the end of the seminar, just a couple of more points I'd like to raise with you, and seeing how the institution of a project portfolio can actually be made, and that allows you to confirm how you're going to start up and document your project drivers so that your portfolio can initiate it correctly. And if you have a PPM and a PMO, remember, the project portfolio management supports the organization goals, whereas the PMO supports the organization's program and project discipline. You can combine the two, but please do separate them because they do have different focuses. With that, we have a project portfolio manager who has many responsibilities. You can read these. I think I'm coming to about 45 minutes, and thank you very much for still being online. As you can read there, providing a lot of support, and has to be an individual who has got project management experience and also business acumen. And the governance that needs to be instituted is selecting projects, planning the organization's workload, and making sure that we are constantly reviewing objectives and meeting our benefits. Well, as it ends, I think the whole project portfolio management can be summed up in just a few words: do the right thing. And it's time to get it right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I accelerated at the end because I think I was abusing a little of your time. And we're open for questions. Right, so yes, right, we have some first questions over here. One of the questions we have, what kind of portfolios are we talking about? Well, we're talking about project portfolios, which means that we have had some initiatives that have been established by a higher body, shall we say, be it at the corporate level or the business unit level. And therefore, we're just looking at the conversion of those initiatives into projects. At the operational level, these will be mostly, shall we say, continuous improvement and other projects to sustain and maintain our current operations, but they are still projects. Whereas at the corporate level, there will be projects being launched in order to transform the organization to be a much more effective organization. Do we have another question here? Yeah. So we have another question here, which is what will be, I did go through it rather fast at the end, I do apologize. The responsibilities of the project portfolio manager are wide. Very often we have got, shall we say, to choose how we're going to create that organization. And that organization needs to have, for the project portfolio, an individual who is like a gyroscope, can we say. An individual who understands, of course, the business of projects and change. An individual who does have business acumen, understands what are strategies, what are business benefits, and can discuss and talk with high level management, can also discuss laterally with different line managers and divisional managers on their business and operational needs, and obviously has a communication line with project managers so that whatever criteria are being used in selection projects or how the projects are being assessed throughout their evolution, that the communication is open. So that will be I think an important person. Usually they will have a few years of experience. Unfortunately, sometimes organizations assign individuals with less experience than necessary, and they find themselves a little swimming upstream. So that is something that you try to avoid. Yes, PMO. I've been asked a question about the PMO, and there is a very important definition separation, if I can use it. Okay, and we used a particular phrase earlier on in our webinar where we have said, "Are we doing the right thing?" And then, "Are we doing the thing right?" For my view, are we doing the right thing is a pure project portfolio management approach. Selection, determining, defining, and allowing funding and resources to be applied to beneficial projects and programs. That is the right thing to do. Now, in order to do it right, and we're talking about projects, well, we need to have project management skills, project management competencies, project management methodologies, tools, techniques. We need to be able to have a variety of governance of projects in place, or else there's no point launching what seems to be a very valuable projects for the organization if unfortunately our level of maturity and a level of professionalism in the discipline of project is weak. We just fail miserably. So that's the separation. Now, one of the last slides that I actually showed you combines the two, but then you are creating what is called a center of excellence, which has a much more powerful role than the two roles just individually. You're dealing with the direction of programs and projects that are at the level of senior management and maybe VP. And then the two cohabit, portfolio management and PMO, but they still have the PPM has its functions and the PMO has its other functions. PMO is for all projects. PPM, you can have certain projects which are underneath the threshold, let's say a few weeks or less than a certain amount of funding, $50,000 or something, that don't go into the portfolio. So you still need a professional approach to project management, and that is provided by the PMO. Do we have any more questions, Sherry? All right, so There's a lot of questions here. How much time you got, guys? Because I've got all the time in the world. Okay. So I've got here, Upsla, thank you. Can we have a common set of templates for project management in IT, healthcare, airline domain? Good one, Balu. I think that is a good question. There are many sets of templates that are maybe going to be used. However, at the high level, I would agree. But the healthcare business, airline business, they will have certain particularities that will need to have specific types of rules for selecting projects and so on. I have another question, please. Thank you, Sherry. Okay, can we apply what's the scale of companies that require PPM? For the moment, you have two projects that compete with each other for organizational needs. This is Aus al Nahar. Then you would need some form of priority mechanism, okay? And those priority mechanisms will be applied so that you do not get yourself tangled, right? So any size of company, as long as you have more than one project going, of course. What are the titles normally associated with portfolio management? Well, project portfolio manager is one of them, and you could have project portfolio assessors. You could have project portfolio business analysts that will help with assessing the actual contents of a business case. So that will be, but job titles, Najmul, I do apologize if I have pronounced your name incorrectly. Depends on each organization. You better check it out with your HR, okay? What's the major difference between the project's development strategy and PPM strategies? Mohammed, I think I understand what you mean. Well, the project portfolio is only there to be able to ensure that all the initiatives that want to be launched to meet whatever strategies do not compete with each other and will be able to select the most beneficial to the organization. So a project development strategy is, from what I understand here, what's the strategy to develop a project, which may be a life cycle or something of that nature. Maybe I've got it wrong there. What is the boundary to define the project program portfolio? What many people say, yes, well, great question. Yusuf Al-Buti. You can discuss over and over again what is a program, what is a project. I will go with saying that a project is a single entity that will produce deliverables, where a program will produce business benefits. Now, certain projects do the same. So that's my first definitions. After that, a program would usually be more strategic, more corporate-wide, more multiple division, and would require to be broken down into subsets, which could be packages or projects. So it's a certain definition that can be varied according to each organization. Portfolios will be a mix of programs which have projects and just individual projects. Balu, you get an agreement for this webinar, right? Is that right? Okay, Balu's here. And from what's the balance score? What is the balance scorecard? You have questions I cannot answer here. Ayad Yafar, a balance scorecard is very similar to, let's say, the SWOT analysis. I'm sure the guys who develop balance scorecard will kill me for that. Please look that up and come to very good seminars that Informa has on balance scorecards. Habib, thank you for the presentation. Habib, thank you, sir. Shukran. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's been close to an hour. Thank you very much for your presence. We have a very large crowd out there. I look forward to actually meeting you in person in our seminar in September 2015 and other seminars that I have the pleasure of delivering for Informa. And thank you very much for your thanks.